Well, hello everyone. Welcome to week 5 of the Formula G Season 2 show. My name is Zotomo and I'm joined by my buddy here, Calamity. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty great. I'm really excited about this one. I can't wait to talk about our country this week because it is Japan. Probably my favorite country to play in all of Geoguessr. So yeah, let's just jump right in and talk about these feature race locations. We start off Calamity outside of Hamamatsu in Aichi Prefecture in between Tokyo and Osaka.
Yep, kind of like a suburban location, not too far away from the big city, but probably not enough time to actually make it there. It was kind of weird in the coverage way that, kind of getting teleported around because all of the roads were so close together, kind of in a grid-like system. So it was
Mhm.
difficult to really make your way to where you wanted to go. But kind of in all directions, pretty much, if you traveled far enough, you would have found good enough signs. It was then just a matter of will you be able to narrow it down so much that you know which street you started on in that kind of like grid pattern. Yeah, but not too big of an issue for most people here.
Yeah, we had a bit of a loop that was kind of different from the normal grid that stood out, as well as being right next to a park, which again we could use to pinpoint that location. But yeah, Japan has the weirdest GeoGuessr car movement I think I've ever seen in a country. I love the country, but like it's very obvious when you're traveling that the car that was going straight for the last like 2 minutes all of a sudden just picks a random road and turns off. And unless you get that intersection correct, you're jumping around coverages and everything. And it's like, what? So it's really weird how they stitch it together in a way. But
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but
Yeah, I've seen some weird areas. I still wouldn't call it like one of the weirdest countries in terms of the just the street view car movement. There's still somewhere. I mean, have you had rounds in Senegal before? That's awful if
uh,
you go outside of like the main cities. But
yeah, I guess it depends on where in Senegal. Yeah.
yeah, but
But
definitely there are some situations where you're like, why don't you just, go that way?
yeah. Yeah, very true. Anyway, round two, we were just west of Otaru in Hokkaido, not too far from Shioya Station, way in the north.
Yeah, and again, pretty much a major road to the north, a major highway to the south. So kind of difficult to get anywhere here without seeing some good signs. And that is reflected in the scores again. Everyone except two people getting a perfect score here.
Yeah, and of course, being right next to, well, not right next to, but in the close vicinity of a train station is always very nice. Easy to spot on the map as points of interest. Round three saw us head to the border of Hiroshima and Shimane prefectures, down there in the Chugoku region, kind of west of Osaka. We were just off of the 432 and really close to being right above the E54, which you don't get to say very often, Calamity.
Yeah, it can be quite confusing on the map if you're not zoomed in far enough, and it looks like there's a major highway going straight past you, but you just don't see it because it's actually a tunnel that goes through.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely the most difficult out of the 5 rounds. I don't even know what you would have done if you went west. I wonder if anyone actually took that way. I'm assuming eventually you would have either had a dead end or a good sign too, but definitely going east was the better choice. You then made it to the 432 after maybe a minute. Then I think, again, either way would have given you good signs eventually. And then it was just a matter of finding the 432 or, some of the biggest cities that the signs pointed to. And then again, finding the small road that goes off of the 432, which does not have a number. So that was probably the most difficult part for a lot of people because the 432 itself is very long. So
Mhm.
if you don't already have a good grasp on where you are roughly based on distances to cities, then that would have been very difficult to find. Especially again if you're not zoomed in far enough. you wouldn't necessarily go to the right road because you've got that E54 there, which looks as if you would have seen it. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, then pinpointing again wasn't that easy. Also took quite a bit of time again because it's not it. It was quite featureless. The road itself, there was no houses on the map. So yeah, it just takes a lot of time to get the right place there, and you could see that in the scores. Only 3 perfect scores in that round.
Yeah, very tough indeed. I was gonna say I don't know what you mean by going west, but yeah, once you hit the 432, either way would be fine. I headed south. I think you headed kind of a bit north,
Yep.
and there's plenty of information. But yeah, I don't know what you would see if you actually went west from the actual starting location. On the map, looking back at it now, there's not a whole lot you might see. You might be able to see the highway. It does pop up out of the ground around there eventually. With 5 minutes, you might have been able to make that, but definitely not as good of information as heading east
Yeah.
for that one. Round four saw us head finally to my little area, Kansai, in Wakayama Prefecture, just east of Arita, near the intersection of the 179 and the 424. The 179 being a prefectural road and the 424 a national road.
Yeah, this was definitely a route where you could have gone in the wrong direction. But then again, the right direction was down the hill, so I'm assuming most people went that way eventually. And if you did, you hit a national road pretty quickly, the 424, and on that, it was pretty. I don't know actually because I didn't travel too far, but I imagine it was pretty easy to find good enough information if just being on the 424 intersecting with the 179 wasn't good enough for you. And it did take me quite a bit because the 424 isn't exactly short, but it's not too long either. So if you just zoom in far enough and you just check alongside the 424, you're gonna find the 179 eventually. Problem is you have to zoom in quite far because there's like a PY of a school blocking the number on the road if you're not zoomed in far enough.
Okay, and then finishing up, we were in Hokkaido again, actually not too far from our round two location. We were on Mount Niseko on the 56, right next to a tunnel, Calamity, so not too bad of a pinpointing location at all.
Yeah, relatively easy to find for sure, but it was kind of in an iffy area where it's probably decent enough to get a 5K. That shouldn't be the problem, but especially if you're looking at getting as close as possible because distance is the tiebreaker. you
Mhm.
you would have struggled a bit because it is relatively straight, the road there, and it's quite hard to tell where exactly you are alongside it because again there's no houses there's no real features, so you'd kind of have to estimate based on the tunnel entrance, which also sometimes is hard to tell where exactly the tunnel entrance is.
Mhm.
Then the curve to the west, which again also can be quite hard to tell where does the curve actually start. It's not always 100% accurate, or not necessarily accurate, but it's not always 100% the same in Google Street View and on Google Maps. So not too easy to get very close, but still, I think most people, with very few exceptions, got at least sort of the location right.
Mhm. Yeah, there's also plenty of other clues, lots of the Hokkaido hints, the Hokkaido cabbage, the white and red arrows pointing down some snowdrift boundaries along the side of the road to prevent kind of snow on the road. So all those kind of clues point to Hokkaido, and then you can search for some of the clues you find and get the tunnel as well. So a very nice round. Yeah, overall, I think the locations were a pretty decent spot. We're kind of way clustered down around Osaka or in Sapporo, though, Calamity. Nothing in Tohoku or Kyushu, but I think maybe that's a good thing because being on some of those islands down there, not fun.
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter too much. Um, if you would have been like somewhere around the Sendai area, maybe somewhere around Fukuoka, but you
Mhm.
definitely don't necessarily want to be on some of those small islands, sort of just off the coastline, because those can be quite difficult to figure out. And I think in general it was a relatively well balanced seed in terms of difficulty, at least.
Mhm.
Not too easy, not too difficult. Pretty good, in my opinion.
Yeah, we had urban, we had rural, we had mountains. So that's pretty much all of Japan right there for that. So very nice. Well, let's see how our drivers fared in good old Japan in this week. Calamity and Boxa getting perfect scores, but Calamity you picking up the first place with the distance. Boxa, though, getting the better of you in time, so he will pick up those bonus points. Labum Greb, Bearfishy Bear, and myself round out the top five. Bottom of the field, pretty much filled with DNSs. Quite a few players busy or on vacation, unable to play in the time, and forgot about it even. For that, kind of around the middle of the pack, closed our champion from last season in 12th, Einarglue and Carp, who have had some decent rounds, as well as Mr. Blue has had a couple decent games down towards the bottom this time, unfortunately. Yeah, anything from you here, Calamity, on these results for Japan?
Yeah, they're quite unusual, I would say.
Yeah.
You've got Box up there as always, but apart from that, I wasn't having the best of seasons so far. Kind of just floating around fourth, fifth, sixth place mostly whenever I did finish in the points. And I think it was also my first win in Formula G. I'm not sure if I
Mm-hmm.
did win a race last season. I got like 2 or 3 podiums, I think, but I don't think I've won one yet. So that's quite nice. You've also got some other people who you normally don't expect that far up. You for one, but also Laban Grab, very fishy bear. Very good players, but you know, usually more towards like seventh or sixth maybe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then we've got quite a lot of good players far down. Mr. Blue only in 16th, Max in 17th. Both of those are in the top 5 in the overall standings. Jack as well, only in 14th. And Shumi came so close to finally getting his first point, but nope.
Not quite. I think it really was that round three where we were in the mountains. I think that was everybody's really killer round, right? I think everybody was got four aces, and then round three was just the killer four or three or four aces for everybody in the
Mm,
top 10, except for pretty much round three. That was where the most points were dropped, a few single points off for other people in the final round, given that it was a bit of a straight stretch of road. But yeah, the big killer there was that round three,
mm.
which really got a lot of people. So would have liked them to get a few more people because I would have liked to be a little higher up. But yeah, I mean, this was pretty much like if I was going to get a shot at placing well on a feature race, given how tight this competition is, it would be in Japan, a map that I have played extensively and have a lot memorized about the country. So that definitely gave me a big edge here. I think that's what you can contribute my little boost up into. But yeah, almost a bit of a topsy-turvy week for a lot of the drivers here.
Yep.
Okay, well, yeah, let's head on to our sprint race locations. We were in Suzuka, the home of Formula One in Japan. There is another track in near
Fuji.
Mount
Yep.
Fuji. Is it just Fuji track?
Yeah.
Fuji Speedway? Yeah.
Mm,
But no, Formula One has, for the most part, been in Suzuka here, just west of Nagoya, across the bay, so to speak. It's a pretty small town, Calamity, and it definitely proved to be a bit tricky in how fast you could lose points as we go through these rounds. Round one, tiny neighborhood, uh, just south of the 54 for you, Calamity.
mm. Yeah, this was one of the situations where I actually got a bit unlucky with the round order because
Mhm.
I went east and then north, and I got to a pretty big shopping mall. And I kind of assumed for the longest time that it was the shopping mall that was later featured at the start of round 4. And that's why I was kind of looking around where you see round 4 on the map and trying to match up roads, but soon, bit too late, but eventually realized that it couldn't be because there was no road going west at sort of the distance I would expect to the shopping mall. So eventually, like towards the end of the round, I had maybe like 20 seconds, 30 seconds left, and I had no idea where we were pretty much. I was just kind of going, I was still hanging on to that hope that we might be somewhere close to that shopping mall. And as
Mhm.
it turns out, we weren't too far away from it. But my guess there truly was a guess, and that I didn't really have any solid evidence that we'd be anywhere close there.
Yeah, a bit tricky in that tiny little neighborhood for that one. Round two saw us head a bit south and actually just outside of the actual speedway on the 643. Family Mart being probably the best point of interest close by to use for pinpointing.
Yeah, if you went north, just super easy to get enough information to know where you are. Um, I don't know, I think I was still a bit annoyed about round one, so I completely messed up pinpointing there. I think I was going off of a building that was not the building I should have gone off, um, and therefore just lost another few points there. But yeah, generally finding the location itself was very easy here.
Yeah, round three saw us probably at the most recognizable of all the locations, given that
Yeah.
it was Suzuka train station. So a
Yeah,
big name right there. You're looking at it as you spawn, essentially, pretty much.
yeah, I'd always recommend for playing any of these city maps that before you start playing, just look at Google Street View, just pick out like 4 or 5 points of interest that, stand out the most when you zoom in. Um, and just look at what they look like because, you're quite likely that you'll end up near one of them. And that definitely helps because while Suzuka Station is, I guess, quite recognizable if you know what it looks like, it definitely doesn't look like a big train station if you
Mm.
have no idea, that is Suzuka train station. And I also think it doesn't say it on the train station anywhere. I'm assuming
I
like
could have
if
sworn
you
it said Suzuka.
yeah, if you had, I'm assuming you had signs nearby, but no, I'm looking at it. It doesn't say Suzuka on the train station. It might say it
Oh,
in
yes, it
kanji,
it
but
does in kanji. That's why.
yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
those are
Like for me, I was
useless.
like, yeah, for me, I was like, oh, Suzuka.
Yeah,
So it was very obvious that it was like, oh, okay, I know where we are. But I guess it's not in English. I didn't even think about that. Oh,
yeah. I looked at
yeah.
Zuzukashi as well, which I think is like
Mm,
the not the bigger, but it looks nicer in the way that train stations go, and
yeah, I think it's the.
that has it in Latin letters on it. But Suzuka train station doesn't, and therefore, it would help a lot if you'd already know what it looks like. I'm assuming, it being the main train station in a city, there would have been,
Mm,
useful signs close by that would have told you it's Suzuka train station. But yeah, just knowing what it looks like made it a whole lot easier.
yeah, very nice. Round four saw us next to a big shopping mall, Eon Mega Shopping Mall, which is a very famous chain in Japan. Makes it pretty easy to pinpoint.
Yep. Also
At
helped.
least, yeah.
Also helped that I'd already spent about 1.5 minutes in round one looking at that shopping mall.
Mm,
So I knew immediately where we were. Not the easiest to pinpoint, actually, though. You do have quite a lot of roads going into that parking lot. Um, and it's not the easiest to
mm.
tell which of these roads are you actually next to. But yeah, in the end, still not too difficult of a round because especially you've got enough time considering you would know very quickly where you are to do that pinpointing.
Yeah, definitely. For that, yeah, a bit tricky to actually get that location, but again, there's plenty of stuff just to get you on the right road, and then pinpoint from there. And then round five saw us jump across the river at a really interesting, just off the main an intersection, a big intersection of the 25 or the prefectural road 643. So it had two names, which caused a little bit of confusion if you're looking at a few signs in the area.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I don't think I ever really saw the river. I might have seen it, but I didn't consciously take it in as this
Mm.
is a big river. It's probably on this side of Suzuka. Um, but yeah, I was struggling a lot with finding the right roads there. I think I wasn't even looking for the 643, but for the 637. Um,
Oh, and that's right. It also, I sorry, I just looked at the location again. It's also labeled as the one on a
oh yeah, I
bridge
was looking
right
for that
there.
too. Yeah.
So
Uh,
you've got three different numbers, and oh
yep.
boy.
Uh, Eventually, I did find the part of this, of the road that fit, which was mainly the 637 going like sort of north south here. just south of the location. And once you did figure
Mm.
out, okay, this is the bridge over the road here, and then we have to be there, pinpointing was very easy. But figuring out that location itself was the difficult part here.
Yeah. Yeah, that pedestrian bridge was very helpful for pinpointing in this round. But the signs actually probably the worst thing about the round.
Yep.
The signs in this one for that. Well, yeah, so that was our sprint race. A very small map, which meant it was very easy to lose points if you're even a few roads off. And we're going to see that kind of reflected in some of the scores here. Our very good pinpointing drivers doing really well. Boxa, Orpheus, Xander, and Carp all getting 25 Ks, with Boxa again at the top, only 8 meters total away. But those points drop off very, very fast compared to our feature race. With that, again, 4 drivers at the bottom there, not getting any points at all. Did DNSing for this one, but just a tough round overall for quite a few drivers. Also, a few of those drivers who were doing pretty decently in the feature race, Labam Greb, myself, down towards the lower half of this one. Calamity.
Yeah, Simi just forgot about it, and Tol Impala had something to do and didn't have solid, internet and access to a computer during the time of it. So those are those two, and Silver Goldie has been missing races here and there during the whole season. Don't know what happened to Danny Blondes, but yeah. Apart from that, Boxer, of course, always at the top. Orpheus, again, after not the best feature race, although he still picked up a couple points there, up there again. Xander and Barry Fishy Bear, especially having a pretty good week, solid points in both the feature race and the sprint race. And yeah, a couple of drivers who didn't do too well in the feature race, picking up some points in the sprint race here. Jack closed, Max. And yeah, some, again, very disappointing week for Mr. Blue, who picked up no points in Japan. And yeah, apart from that, nothing too exciting here, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I did want to mention about the sprint race was how much time we had. At most, the drivers with the most amount of time have been somewhere around 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes. We had almost 5 minutes for the lowest drivers in this one, and the fastest drivers were around that 3.5 minute mark. So I don't know if the organizers just decided that because of the weird nature of Japanese towns, we needed almost a whole extra minute and a half.
We certainly did need it.
I mean, it helped everybody. I think we all would have done even worse if we had less time. But it was quite a shock for that, and I was really mad at myself for having that much time and making a couple very basic errors in my orientation and whatnot, and to kind of making some mistakes. But for that, I mean, it was kind of really interesting. I just thought I would mention it, that the time limits are usually pretty consistent in terms of what the drivers get in the sprint lineup, but this one was definitely an exception. And I believe next week we go back to that standard, about 2 minutes and 3.5 minutes at the high end. So
it's actually because I remember it actually. It was 1 minute and 20 for the fastest and 2 minutes and 50 for the slowest for next week.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely being a bit generous with the time here, given how crazy Japanese towns can be, and definitely drivers made the most of it. Quite a few of them getting very nice scores, 4 aces for this, 4 perfect scores for this. Well, let's see what this does to the driver rankings overall. Boxa maintains his very dominant lead in first place. Moist Flubber and Mr. Blue, despite picking up 0 points, still keeps his third spot. Orpheus, Max, and round out the top 5, with Calamity just outside of that in sixth. Towards the other end of the table, we still have 2 drivers on 0 points, Shumi and Slovak. Danny and Wickham at 4. I pick up my first points, moving me up to 10. Other than that, I don't think there's too much worth noting. Leban Grab does give himself a bit of a boost with his great performance, as does Wakelock. Other than that, I think everything is pretty stable throughout there. Very, very tight from 6th all the way down into about 10th there, Calamity, though.
You said as does Wakelock. Wakelock, who has picked up no points this week. So I'm not assuming he did a very big jump.
Oh, I thought he had a couple good rounds. Maybe I was just confusing that like, oh, he had really good rounds, and his overall score was not. So I got a bit confused. Sorry about that. So yeah, no points for him. So he stays where he is. So
Yeah, Boxer just sort of almost already as the winner here. Obviously, we're still just at the halfway point, but 73 points is a very sizable gap. Um, Biggest jumps this week probably by myself, Barry Fishy Bear, Xander. Yeah, Lab and Grab picked up quite a few points as well.
mhm.
Disappointing weeks, of course, for Tolan Parler, who couldn't play. Also, Ainaglu not picking up a point here. And yeah, not too much apart from that. You already said it, your first points. Close to pick up a couple points again after, not having a good week last week, but still down in 17th in the table. It's not what he would have wanted. And even his teammate from last season, Simi, only down in 18th. So both of them not really having too great of a season. And yeah, you still got quite a few of the newcomers up there at the top, with Box and Moist Flub especially. But since the start of the season, like at the start of the season, we had pretty much only newcomers at the top. And since then, we've kind of changed it to the way that, pretty much from third down to eighth, it's all just players who already played in season one. And the newcomers have kind of just slowly fallen down the table a bit, with the exception of the two aforementioned.
Mhm. Yeah, very nice performances by those two newcomers for this one. Yeah, so I definitely think the back end of the season is very, very different in terms of countries to the first half. So we
Mm.
could see a bit of a shuffling of the drivers who were able to pick up a lot of points in some of these difficult or tricky countries with that everybody plays, like Argentina and France and Italy. But then we get into some more interesting countries that may not be more common knowledge and might need a little bit of extra practice to get used to. Things like Norway. There was one other.
So
I closed it. Of course I did.
yeah, there's a South
Ah,
Africa, Finland, and the
South Africa.
UAE.
That's what I want to think of. Yeah,
Yep.
South Africa. Um, I mean, if you find information, can be nice, but again, it's not a country people are going to be playing very often necessarily, especially with like the UAE. So things can get quite interesting in this back half of the season for that. Well, we do have another competition to talk about to wrap things up. We've got the Constructor Cup. Nordhagen, obviously boosted by Box's performance, and Chariot by Moist Flubbers are in the 1-2 spot. Gantrum still holding on to a pretty solid third. Then the field is pretty close after the next couple. FGT and Conservanza in the 90s. Cape 72, and then in the 50s, quite a few teams. Octane, with my point boost, did move up a little bit closer to Bamberg, but still kind of way out of it. And Opava, again, not having that decent of a start to the season for them.
Yeah, it looks like there's not too many changes going on at the moment here. Cape had a relatively good weekend compared to Lancaster, who didn't score a single point last week because Simi forgot to play, and Wakeluck, as we mentioned before, not having a good time in Japan. Other than that, this week mostly was just points going to the teams that were already sort of at the top. Pretty good season for Orient as well, who picked up 23 points, which is just 7 less than they'd picked up in the whole season so far, which sort of puts them out of that fight for the bottom three and into that fight for the midfield. And yeah, Octane, Opava, and wait, I'm looking at a wrong screen. Uh oh, because I was looking at the spreadsheet. It looks like
Mm,
Ben has made
there's
a
an
little
error.
mistake there. Because he's apparently got two different lines for Octane Engineering. Uh, but yeah, other than that, pretty tight in the midfield, especially from Lancaster down to Bamberg. It's only 5 points. But the top seems relatively decided with Nordhagen. Not only because Boxer is running away with it, but also Max is regularly picking up good points here and there. And yeah, behind that, everything's still possible. We'll see how it shapes up in the second half of the season. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's a lot more interesting in the midfield than last season. But the fight for the first place is a bit less interesting.
Yeah, I think maybe we pretty much already got our top three decided: Scantrum, Chariot, and Norhagen. I mean, you and FGT is kind of close in touching distance, but it's quite a big gap we're already seeing there for that one. So they might be able to have a bit of a race of their own, and then there'll be a fight for the middle, and then also a fight to see who doesn't come in last towards the bottom of the table for that. Well, before we head on out, we got to talk about our map. And the map next week is the Czech Republic by Simi. A local average score is 14,974. It's been played over 30,000 times with over 10,000 locations and almost 1,000 likes. And we're going to be in Prague for our sprint race. So you're right, Calamity, your thoughts on the Czech Republic?
Yeah, we'll see if Simi actually, gets a good result this time, considering he's playing his own map. But yeah, Czech Republic usually relatively easy, especially if you've got 5 minutes. There's signs pretty much everywhere. And while the road numbers can be quite tricky, sometimes they are generally ordered. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking for one specific one, it can be a bit out of place. So I've struggled with finding one specific road number before, but usually not too big of an issue. We'll see how it is with pinpointing. It depends a bit on the locations, I guess. But I think they've also recently widened the leeway you've got for a 5K for every map from 15 to 25 meters. So that should make it even easier for players to get a perfect score there.
Interesting. Yeah, Czech Republic is pretty well organized. If you're able to find a major highway, even sometimes smaller ones because of how they're a digit off of that major highway, it's you can just kind of go in a little bit of a loop through the country to find the numbers until they add up correctly, and then just search that area. So it can be quite nice. So I think actually an average score of 14,900 is actually kind of low.
Yep.
I think most of our drivers are with 5 minutes at least are going to easily be pushing that 25K boundary for sure, as long as we have decent locations in the seed. Prague, Calamity, a really well labeled city and a lot smaller than Paris. So has a little bit of the benefits of Paris in its labeling, but the size is quite small.
Yeah, Prague is super easy, which also explains why we've got such a short time limit. You've got it labeled exactly the same way as you would have Paris or Vienna, for example, in that you've got districts and those districts have a number. The difference you've got to Vienna is in Vienna, the number of the district doesn't actually show up on the map, whereas in Prague and in Paris they do. It can be sometimes a bit weird to find the number you're looking for, because especially, for example, District 2 just doesn't really show up anywhere. So if you're a bit unlucky, you can have trouble with that. It's also like ordered in a weird way where it goes out like a spiral, where it starts with 1 in the middle and then 3 is to the east, and then we go south for 4, then we go west for 5, north for 6, and then we just sort of keep going in a weird spiral. But yeah, usually pretty easy to find out the general area, and also pretty easy to pinpoint. You'll find signs at every intersection, and there's a lot of intersections in Prague. So yeah, probably the most difficult part is just a short timer. But if you don't get unlucky or just do a bad job, you should be able to 25K Prague without many problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, major train stations as kind of points of interest. There's a big castle in the south of the city, a major river running pretty much north-south through the city, kind of towards the west of kind of like downtown. But in terms of the city itself, it's sort of down the middle, I would say, maybe slightly askew. So that's something to look forward to, as well as a pretty massive park on the west side. So yeah, definitely, even with only a few rounds of practice, or even just a look at the map, you'll pick up quite a bit of information about how Prague works, and it should be a very interesting sprint race location with not a lot of time. So we'll see how everybody does in that race. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed our little bit of a look at how everybody is doing in week 5 and in Japan, and how the championship race is forming up. We are in now to the back half of the season, the final 5 races. So we're going to see really everything kind of come together here in this one. And we'll see you all in the Czech Republic next week. Take care.
Bye.